Sapio File. Noun. One who is attracted to intelligence. Join us, three fun-loving lovers of knowledge who are ready to dig into your favorite topics with our very own nerdy diatribes, words of wisdom, and takes on life as millennials. Welcome to the Sapio Files. Welcome back to our next episode. And I am drinking wonderful Chianti out of a glass that says The Musical of Musicals, which is a show that I did 2 years ago now. And it is a show in which the entire plot line is, I can't pay the rent, you must pay the rent, I'll pay the rent, in the style of all different musical theater composers. So my question, my topic that I would like to pose for this week is everything an adaptation of something else in literature, and is that a good thing? Is it cool when we see the same story reinvented over and over? Or is it more interesting when there's like a super original idea? I think sometimes people are attached to some of the classic plots, and that's why adaptations do so well. So I want to talk about a lot of topics involving literature and how it's put together. So that's my first question I'd like to pose. Adaptations. What are your thoughts?
My main thought, and I was thinking about it. On one hand, I agree with you in that a lot of plots seem to follow the same type of cycle. Like you look at Richard Wagner's opera The Ring Cycle, and it's The Lord of the Rings. You look at like a lot of the classic storylines that you see in movies, like even Star Wars. Heroic guy finds out that he has this all-powerful parent, and then ends up saving the galaxy. It's very, very like unlikely hero finds out his importance, rises to the occasion, saves the world. But then I was thinking that I don't think that people are intentionally adapting other plots. I think what's actually happening is that humanity is more attached to specific themes. And because I feel like there's so much going on in life that's so negative that people often are drawn to literature and movies that have certain thematic things going on, like that classic good versus evil, or hope in the midst of something that's very, very dire, very, very bad. So that's what I'm seeing more often. Like I'd say that people aren't copying each other's plots, but rather the plots are just falling into place because people are drawn to each other's themes. So that's what I was thinking, because I think all of us need that little bit of hope, that little bit of like love will conquer all, that little bit of good will conquer evil. And I think that kind of lends itself to the plots that become the plots that we see recycled over and over again. So it's not necessarily that authors and producers and directors are trying to copy one another. It's just that in their heart of hearts, that's what they want to portray on screen. And it just kind of comes off like that.
I think you have a really good point there. I think people do get attached to particular themes. And what you said about the journey of how plots develop, I have more on that in a little bit that I want to talk about. But I think that you definitely have a real point. That there's things that people go to literature for. There's things that people go to movies or plays. And I think it's important to be able to give them that.
I kind of segued off into not adaptations, but just like themes and everything. But
themes are great, and we're just talking literature.
I've seen really great and really awful adaptations.
Yeah,
so
I would say it depends on like how well it's done. Like I don't think you can give a general answer one way or the other.
What are some of your favorite adaptations?
I really, really loved Gregory Peck's portrayal of Atticus Finch in To Kill a Mockingbird.
Definitely.
That's a good one.
That was a great adaptation. I really loved, I believe it was Jeffrey Rush who was in The Book Thief.
The Book Thief is a great one.
That was a phenomenal book to movie adaptation. We touched upon 13 Reasons Why last week, but I think that fell short as an adaptation, especially since it had so much time to really tell that story, and I think it still fell short.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that there's a lot of good adaptations. I also like, creative adaptations of things. Like, I kind of love that The Lion King is Hamlet.
I was just thinking about that a little while ago. And I wrote a paper on that in my AP English class in high school, I remember.
That's really cool.
Comparing and contrasting it. I don't think people realize that. And then it's really once you start to think about oh yeah, there's so many similarities and parallels.
And then the thing that's so cool about things like that is that without even, I don't want to say indoctrination, but without even knowing it, kids are getting an idea for the themes and the plots in Hamlet. So they're getting that Shakespeare before they're getting Shakespeare. So when they actually read Shakespeare, they can relate to it more because they're like, oh, I've heard this story before. So I think adaptations like that are so cool because of that they really give children and adults, because adults watch Lion King. Lion King's the bomb. It gives them that it gives them that background, and maybe they wouldn't have understood Hamlet as well if they hadn't first seen Lion King, which is interesting because sometimes adaptations can then help you understand an original.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of adaptations that people don't realize that it's the same plot. Even it's a direct parallel. It's so exactly perfectly aligned. But even the movie Clueless, people think that's a silly 90s movie. That's Emma.
Or 10 Things I Hate About You.
Well, 10 Things I Hate About You is Taming of the Shrew. It's an exact parallel. Yeah. So I think a lot of them are interesting and important in a way in that they bring these classics to a larger population. Mm-hmm. So to people who aren't necessarily going to go pick up Jane Austen or Shakespeare, they're still experiencing these plots, whether or not they're aware of it. I don't know that everybody who's seen these movies is aware that...
Probably not.
Those are the plot lines. And I mean, they seem like silly teen movies, but they're actually timeless stories.
And I think that's a testament to the originals as well, that if they can be adapted that many times and still be successful, even if it is just as a seemingly corny 90s movie, if they can be adapted and have an audience that really enjoys them, that just is a testament to how great the original was. Mm-hmm. And how no matter how you adapt the original, it'll still hit someone at some point, whoever is watched reading. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and She's All That is sort of a takeoff of Pygmalion.
Yeah.
So I think that's really cool that it's able to bring these plots to such a wide audience.
Do you guys have any favorite adaptations or ones that you can't stand?
Oh God.
I tend to like books better than movies. I find that's pretty much always been the case. Because then you leave it up into your own imagination.
Right, and they also by nature are more detailed. Mm-hmm. They have to be, just by the medium that you're experiencing the story through. It's the original author's perception. So you're able to see the themes that they meant more clearly. A lot of times the movie adaptations, while some movie adaptations are fantastic, there are great movie adaptations out there, sometimes the movie adaptations are more of the director's vision than the author's vision, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but sometimes it's mixing genres, mixing themes.
Well, not only that, but you mentioned perception, and I think that's so important that when you're reading something and the words are just going into your brain, into your imagination, you're bringing with you all of your own baggage and all of your history, and that's how you're perceiving it. Whereas when you're watching a film, it evokes emotions, but it doesn't necessarily allow you to bring your own background into understanding a certain character. Mm-hmm. So I think that's why a lot of people do relate more to the novels and short stories and plays that they read at first before they, see something on screen. I'm trying to think of a good adaptation. Loved Perks of Being a Wallflower book and film.
Yes. Perks of Being a Wallflower is great, and that's a really important one, I think, for young teens through high school, through college, really.
Yeah.
Did you guys like Pride and Prejudice?
Yes.
Of course.
Yeah.
Have you met my cats?
They're Darcy and Bingley.
Well, I know you did. That question was directed at Kayla.
Kayla helped name the cats.
Oh, I didn't know that.
She was with me the night that I got them, and we were going through names, and she's like, "You're the perfect gentleman. They should be Darcy and Bingley."
Yes, I love Pride and Prejudice, and I very much relate to Elizabeth Bennet.
I like Pride and Prejudice because it, does have that classic feel, that old-timey feel, but it also is not told in a way that it's subservient women. It very much is about the strength of the women. So I appreciate that. And I also appreciate, obviously, the two male characters because I made my babies be their namesakes. One of them is here.
Hey, Darce.
Darcy, who's that? Who's that?
This looks like a tired kitty.
He was asleep. I picked him up. But yes, no, my cats are named after Mr. Darcy and Mr. Bingley of Pride and Prejudice. And Pride and Prejudice has had a lot of adaptations. I really liked the BBC adaptation. There was a silly adaptation that was like sorority school version of Pride and Prejudice, where they were like sorority sisters instead of real sisters. That was very, very silly, but it did keep the main points of Pride and Prejudice. So I do like a lot of the literary classics, but I'm also, nerd, English teacher, reading specialist, literary person.
So I think one that's been done so many times and adapted, and I've seen good adaptations and bad adaptations, but I think again, it's just I'm reiterating, and if I'm being redundant, I apologize, but A Christmas Carol is done.
Oh, yeah,
just so timeless. Like everybody recreates A Christmas Carol. There's so many adaptations of Christmas Carol, but again, I think it speaks to just how pivotal it is as a work of literature and a work of fiction. And I think that even when Dickens was writing, it was meant to be like a fun story. He had no any idea that it was going to be as big as it was. But that's what you get when you're writing for the population. Like he was writing for the common people, and that's when he was able to reach so many people.
So like PBS is having an adaptation. I think it's like 2-part, like of Little Women starting this Sunday. So
oh my God, I love the Winona Ryder one with Susan Sarandon. So yeah.
So this one, I'm not really sure who they are. They're probably like English actresses. I know Angela Lansbury is in it. I'm not sure what her role is, but I'm very interested to watch it. So it's this Sunday on PBS. I think it's at 8:00. So
interesting. So we'll have to all check that out.
I'll check it out and I'll report back next week. But I will say, I read the book when I was young, and I loved the character of Jo. She was my favorite.
Arch.
And she's great.
So I actually was really pissed off because I didn't like how it ended or how something happened. I never finished the book. I didn't like that what's his name ended up with Amy and not Jo. So
but you gotta read the end.
Wait. As soon as that happened, I was like, no, I'm not having this shit. I'm done. And then I refused to finish the last few chapters.
No, you have to finish it.
No.
But Professor Bear is so good for her.
It's not like Laurie wasn't meant to be with Jo.
That wasn't her true love. Not at all.
No, Jo is meant to be with who she ends up with.
Amy was a brat. I didn't like her. And then all of a sudden he's like, oh yeah, Amy and Jo changed places in my heart. I'm like, bullshit. That happened way too quick.
No, but what you don't see is that time has passed.
But you're when you're a 10-year-old, obviously you want the obvious to happen. So
no, I get it. When I was 12 and I was reading that the first time, and granted I read to the end, so I was okay. But when I first read the chapter when Jo refuses Laurie when he proposed, I was like, my ship is sinking. I understood it. I was like, this is wrong. But then you get to the end and it's Professor Bear, and you're like, that's right.
That's who she's supposed to be with. It's not who you initially think she is. And I think that's another good theme in literature. I'm going to just tangent this. This wasn't even on my notepad. That's another good theme in literature. Is a first love necessarily the right love? And I love that Little Women actually took it to a place where it doesn't necessarily have to be your first love. I think a lot of literature loves to bring people back to their first loves, but I think that when you truly focus from a character perspective, there are so many interesting places you can take characters when you have them explore different partnerships. So that's something I really appreciate about Little Women.
Yeah, and it's another theme that's prevalent in other plots too. Even if you think of how Éowyn fell hard for Aragorn in Lord of the Rings, but then ended up being with Faramir, who was the person that she was meant to be with. And then granted, we all knew they were endgame when we were reading, but Ron was with Lavender Brown, bleh. And then Hermione was with Victor Crumb. Ron and Hermione were meant to be together.
Yeah.
I don't make the gagging noise as much with Victor Crumb. Like, he wasn't right for her, but he was not like...
He was not Lavender level gag.
Shut up. Shut up, Lavender.
Okay. So, I wanted to talk about the two types of plot diagrams or particular series of events in the way that they typically happen in fictional stories. The first one is the basic plot mountain, and the second one is the hero's journey. And if these are appropriate models, useful models, if we depend on these models for comprehension, and like things we like, things we don't like about these models of literature and fiction, which are very, by and large, used. So, all right, first one is the plot mountain. The plot mountain is the basic diagram. If you have, taken an English course in the past, in like probably really like middle school or high school English course in the past like 10 years, they definitely don't teach this. I don't remember learning it when we were in school, but as an English teacher, I definitely teach it. So the plot mountain begins with the exposition where you are introduced to the characters in the setting and any background information that you need. It continues to an inciting event where something happens to call the protagonist to action for something. Something happens to set off the plot. Then the rising action is all the events that lead towards a climax. The climax is the big turning point of a story, followed by the falling action, events happen as a result of the climax, and a resolution. Now, pretty much all fictional literature has these phases. They may have additional phases. They may have additional peaks, additional inciting events, but generally it all follows this plot line. And I think that it's a very important plot line because it does resolve a lot of the issues. So, people often feel cheated if problems that are introduced are not fully resolved, although they aren't always in the terms of series books. So, I guess I'm wondering what your thoughts are about this prescribed pattern. Is it a good pattern? Does it help us comprehend? It is the way that I can probably pick out these pieces in almost every piece of fiction, and it is the way that students are taught to write fiction. So, thoughts on it?
I think it's good. It's, like you said, easy to comprehend and understand. And when you're learning first how to analyze a book when you're young.
Yeah, it's definitely helpful for analysis. Is it too prescribed? Does it make us not be as surprised by events? Okay, what do you think?
The first part of what I'm thinking is this one of those situations where, like, what came first, the chicken or the egg, and teachers and educators just decided to create this mountain because it's how people are telling stories to begin with? Because people have been telling stories forever. Like, if you think of people, like, even, like, the earliest forms of humans had cave paintings. They were telling stories. So, like, I feel like any good story does have that natural up and down. And maybe there are a few up and downs in every story that culminate in one big, like, climax and then resolution. But I think that this was created, like, this diagram version was created because people naturally told stories like that. Because they realized innately that people reacted a certain way when stories were told with this beginning, middle, and end.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I also feel like, so as someone who's written a book,
which we all should go buy. By the way, I know we mentioned this once before, but listeners, there's a fabulous book out there. It's called Someone Else's Shoes by the lovely Kayla Ann Provost, and it is available currently on Amazon and BarnesandNoble.com. You should all read it. It's a fast read. It's a wonderful read. It has fantastical elements. It has strong female and male protagonists. Everybody go get it. And continue. Sorry.
Thank you. But when I was writing the book, I noticed that I was almost doing this plot mountain instinctually. Like, I didn't realize I was doing it. I just did it. And then I looked back and people were like, oh, that was a really good, like, climactic point. And I was like, yeah, it was totally on purpose. And it wasn't. I just wrote it because it felt right.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, your book does have a very clear climax. And as one of the few teachers in the country who has actually taught your book as a unit, I can definitely speak to that because that is one thing I have people find. And I also used your model as an example for a writing class, like pulling the climax out, putting it out of context in the beginning, and then having people have to work back up to the climax. So I think that's an interesting literary tool as well. I'm not someone who's against the plot mountain at all, actually. I think it's very important, and I think it is an interesting way to tell stories. I think that where it becomes concerning, it actually has nothing to do with literature. I think because people are so used to stories being played out this way, we look for our lives to follow these patterns. And life, day-to-day life, does not necessarily follow the plot mountain. So I think it leads people to maybe misunderstand or misjudge pieces of their life because of where they feel they are in their journey. So something like I'll have a very strong, solid relationship with somebody, and I'll fight for them, and I will, like, strive to get them. But then we get married. And that's the end of the plot. All the Disney movies end with the marriage. So now...
and they live happily ever after.
Right. But how do you do happily ever after? You don't just magically live happily ever after. Now you have a new story, a new journey, continuing with that. But do people give up on, not even just romantic relationships, but do people give up on things that maybe should have continued in their lives because they want to ascribe their lives to this plot mountain type of scenario? Like, I've reached the climax of my life. Like, there's definitely, I'm guilty of saying this too. And to an extent, it helps you understand things in your life, but there are parts of my life where I'm like, well, that moment, like those couple of months where this intense thing happened, that was the climax of this whole phase of my life. And everything led up to there, and because that happened, I'm a changed person. But is that too much to put on one particular moment or one particular phase of your life? You know, like, I think we keep growing and changing. So it's just interesting. I think it's very important in literature. I think it makes stories interesting to read and comprehend. I don't know if we maybe put too much weight on it. And I think maybe I think we should see life, if we're going to describe it to fiction, as more of a series of like a TV show where there's continuous episodes and there may be multiple climaxes, resolutions.
The thing that I just wrote down on my notepad, it's important to remember that mountains come in ranges.
I love that quote. Yes.
And I think that is true of whether you're looking at a piece of literature or a film or your own life. That, getting to the top of one mountain or getting to the bottom of one valley where you're really, really upset or things aren't going right, that there's always something else to climb. Like, even like when you're walking down a street that seems like it's like flat, there's always a slight incline and a slight decline. There's no perfectly flat area of the earth ever.
Well, there are the plains out in the middle of the country. There are those plains, the lowlands, but
yeah.
I'm just being annoying. Continue your point.
Anyways, but mountains come in ranges, and like there's always groups of mountains and hills and valleys and peaks, and like so, like we need to remember that there's always going to be another one, and that our lives are just a continuous stream of like going through these emotional and mental hikes. And I think that's important, and I think that it's just as important to not compare your life too much to any fiction, just as it's important to not compare yourself to fiction, but also not to compare yourself to nonfiction, because both are dangerous. Yeah. Because like people are not only like I found myself not only being like, oh, but when this happened to Elizabeth Bennet, this happened. And it's like, Kayla, no. But I've also been known to be like, oh, this happened in this person's life that I know, and it's like, but that's not your life.
Right.
That's
yeah.
Like, this fictional story is not your life, and this real story is not your life. Like, you need to live your own life and just know that you're going to have your own hurdles and your own mountains, and that's just going to be it.
And I do think there's a lot of validity to the plot mountain. It is a way to understand stories. And I think without it, it would just be a series of vignettes that don't make any sense. Right. So you can't really write fiction without that basic structure. I just think it's an interesting thing to debate. The other one I wanted to talk about was the hero's journey, which is a bit more complex. It's another prescribed set of adventures that happen over the course of a story, specifically in heroic epics, stories where someone's going through something. Although it is possible to find these elements in stories that aren't necessarily supposed to be heroic.
I was going to say, you can have both in one story.
You can, absolutely.
Harry Potter is a hero's journey that has these mountain ranges.
Well, every story has to have the plot mountain. It has to.
Yeah. But the Odyssey is an example of this hero's journey.
Yes. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly go through the parts of a hero's journey. So the hero's journey is broken down into these pieces. So the first one is the call to adventure. I'm actually going to explain these in terms of Hunger Games, so people can understand.
Okay.
Because I think probably a lot of the listeners have heard of Hunger Games, at least seen the movie, right? I would guess so. All right.
Yeah.
So part number one is the call to adventure. Our hero is sitting somewhere and something happens to bring them an invitation to go into some sort of adventure. So in the Hunger Games, the call to adventure is the reaping.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And Katniss has to be there. And when she hears her sister's name called, that is in the plot mountain, the inciting event. But it is also her call to adventure and her part of the next part, refusal of the call. Refusal of the call is part 2, where the hero has reluctance to accept this journey. Katniss accepts it because her sister is called. But then she is not so sure about why, like, what she's doing. She wants to do it for her sister, but there's a lot of fear there. The next piece is meeting the mentor, and for her, the mentor, she has several. She has Effie, she has Cinna, and Haymitch. Yes, so she has several mentors. Meeting the mentor, in which the hero meets someone who is going to help them through this journey. The next part is crossing the threshold, where you cross into this other world, this place that you can now experience this hero's adventure. So that is entering the arena for Katniss. The next part is called the belly of the whale. It's a very dramatic way to call it, which is basically the abyss. You're being swallowed by the new world. Then there's a part called meeting with the goddess, in which the hero gains help or assistance from somebody important. There's a couple places you could go with this in Hunger Games, but I would say in Hunger Games, this is where she makes an ally, where she makes a friend, also where she becomes close to Peeta. So where she has an ally in Rue, and when she becomes close to Peeta. These are meetings with the goddess. The Temptress is the thing that might take them off this path. So in the Hunger Games, I would say... Not quite yet, berries. Berries are a little bit later. But the Temptress, I would say, is when they change up the rules. The Temptress is when they take them off the path. So it could be Katniss's first kill, when she didn't really want to do that. It could be when they change up the rules and bring her closer to Peeta, only to change them back.
Right.
And then the climax of the story is called the Atonement with the Father. So this is so perfect for Hunger Games because it's the discussion with the person who made this reality for you. So that is the climax, the berries.
Berries?
No, they can't. They need to have a victor. They can't win without a victor. So that is what I would call the Atonement with the Father. The ultimate boon is the final achievement of the quest. So when Katniss and Peeta win the Hunger Games together. Then there is a refusal of return, in which Katniss now does not want to go into this world, back into this world where this happens over and over to people. The magic flight is the final obstacles. So I would say for Katniss, those final obstacles are her media persona. Now Snow is coming after her. Those are her final obstacles. The magic flight. The rescue from without. So that's her family, her friends coming back to her to bring her back to her reality. The crossing the return threshold, in which she enters District 12 again. And finally, the Master of Two Worlds, in which the hero can understand both pieces and has a greater appreciation for the entire reality. So that's the hero's journey. I know it's long and confusing. I do think a lot of times it is a more complete way to look at a story. I actually, interestingly was not introduced to the hero's journey in my life as an English teacher. I was introduced to the hero's journey in a show that I did, a recent show, well, recent-ish, it was almost a year ago actually, called A New Brain. And our director, who actually, if you're interested in literature and fiction, has her own podcast all about fiction and the true facts behind it. Her name is Juliana Valente, and her podcast is called Strange But True Dear. So I like to plug other podcasts that are good. So you might want to check hers out. But she introduced us to the hero's journey and had each of us think about our own characters and how our characters went through these phases. So this is not something that happens in every single story, but what are your thoughts about this type of prescribed plan for heroic tales?
I think it works very well when you're describing it with Hunger Games. You could probably use it for Lord of the Rings.
Well, absolutely.
As an obvious answer. That was the first one that just popped into my head.
Well, the reason Lord of the Rings is so epic is because there are multiple heroes, but the hero's journey, I think, is seen most prevalently in Aragorn, just because he is set up as like that individual who has a call to action. He's called to help Frodo and Sam when he is quite literally, he's ostracized himself. He's calling himself Strider. He doesn't want to be associated with the kings of Gondor because of the shame that's been put on them because they were too weak to destroy the ring to begin with in the Silmarillion. Also great, by the way. And then, so he has his call to action and then his reluctance, and he only really comes into his own. I mean, like, there's a turning point when Boromir is killed when Aragorn realizes it's bigger than himself, that like this person who was a steward of Gondor has believed in him and has put his faith in him, and then it kind of propels him to have faith in himself. And by the end of the 3 novels, he's of course the king of Gondor again, but it's seen most in him, that classic story. Anything that has like a king, like King Arthur, the Odyssey. Like the Odyssey is like, if you're looking at a classic piece of literature that you want to see this played out piece by piece, the Odyssey is perfect. It has like Scylla and Charybdis. It has Calypso's island. It's literally the Temptress is Calypso. They fight the Cyclops. Like, it's so intense. So like, yeah, I love this. I love literature.
Yeah,
I do too.
There are a million other stories that it plays out, but like when you were saying all the points, I'm like, oh, the Odyssey. There it is. It would also work for anything that's semi-related to the Odyssey, like Cold Mountain. If anybody's seen the movie Cold Mountain, that's hero's journey when in Ministry Civil War. It would work for Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? All these adaptations then have the same journey too.
What are you currently reading in it? Anything?
I'm reading 2 things. I tend to Rory Gilmore my books.
I do too.
So I have books depending on what kind of mood I'm in. So I'm in between like several books at once. I'm reading the Alice Hoffman, which is the prequel to Practical Magic, which was made into a movie adaptation with Nicole Kidman. We did. We both got the same book. So yeah. I'm also reading Amy Schumer's book, Girl with the Lower Back Tattoo, which is hilarious. Oh my God. So funny. So those are my main 2 right now. But then I was also getting into a historical fiction about the Civil War. So like, it's very like
all over the place.
Yeah.
Outlander. I'm about to start book 4. So it's like a big commitment because there's 8 books. I'm going through. It's good.
Yeah.
It's great. I tend to flip between books too. I've been reading a lot of the Malcolm Gladwells lately, actually. So I'm currently reading David and Goliath. I also recently read Blink. If you're not familiar with Malcolm Gladwell, he has really fascinating thoughts on how the world works. So David and Goliath is about the underdogs. Blink is about split-second judgments and how we make them. Other books I read by him were The Tipping Point, the thing that makes something like catch fire. Another Hunger Games reference. Okay, and what other books have I read by him? Oh, and Outliers, which is what makes people that like 1 in a million. So I've been into his books lately, which are more of a nonfiction thing. Fiction stuff, I mean, a little of everything. Also, my entire career is like reading with kids. So tons and tons of that. Recent fiction that I read something that was a little dark. It was called The Wednesday Group. I recently finished it. And it's a book about this group of women who are going through problematic marriages. So it's like a support group.
Okay.
It's a little dark, very interesting. So all different things. Yeah, I really just pick up whatever looks interesting.
2 things. I heard Malcolm Gladwell talk at a work conference.
Awesome.
He was awesome. And if you like, what did you say, the Wednesday,
The Wednesday group.
Drowning with Ophelia is really good too. That talks about a lot of women's issues and just like empowerment as well as depression and getting stuck in interesting relationships. So like that's a really good one, because, and obviously it's a reference to Ophelia, Hamlet's Ophelia, and not having that agency to control your life. And it's a bunch of interviews with women, so that's really cool too.
Very cool. So those are books we're reading. What are some important books that you think everyone should read?
Kill a Mockingbird.
It's classic, definitely.
I would say
Literary
definitely
people.
To Kill a Mockingbird.
I mean, I think that there are some that you just should read because there are so many references in society and the media to them. Like, everybody should read at least one Shakespeare. I don't care what one.
Yep.
But whatever one you want. We're going to disagree in a second if it's what I thought she said.
I did say Lord of the Flies, and I know you probably don't like that one, right? So
Hate it.
I read it in 10th grade, and it really like touched me emotionally just to see like how those kids turned into like, I don't want to say barbarians, but like they became like uncivilized. And it was just interesting to see the whole dynamic of how they survived stranded on that island. And I just think that's a good example of what not to do, you know? So I don't know that we're necessarily going to disagree, but it just, I thought it was very eye-opening in that sense.
Okay.
And it makes you, it made me self-reflect and be like, okay, what would I do if I was in that situation, and look at what they're doing and why it's working or not working depending upon the issue, and how would I change it to do it differently to make it work? You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think that's why it's on so many reading lists.
Right.
I can't stand that novel.
It is by no stretch of my imagination or anyone. It's not a favorite book of mine, but I'm just saying it was a good teaching tool, if you will.
Ugh. I just can't stand Lord of the Flies. There's a line in Silver Linings Playbook that Jennifer Lawrence is saying where she's like explaining Lord of the Flies to Bradley Cooper's character, and she's like, and they have a conch, they have a shell, and the person with the shell has the power, and I'm just like, I think there's some important lessons, but I think there's other works of literature that can portray the same lessons without like.
Yeah.
But are they written on a level where younger children can understand them?
Totally.
I don't think younger children should read Lord of the Flies until that.
But like I read it in like 9th or 10th grade.
But you have to realize that 9th and 10th grade literature is not children's lit at all. I teach with like all different levels of kids literature. By the time you're in high school, those are adult fiction. Those are not anything that are written on any kid level at all.
And I mean, I get that there's different themes, but I probably, instead of assigning Lord of the Flies, would have assigned my class both Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad, because then we could watch Apocalypse Now as well, and assign them Animal Farm.
Animal Farm, I think, is very important.
Because they're similar themes that the kids are learning. The books are, granted, more adult, but it just takes out the whole pig scene. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, what's happening? Like, stop! Like, it's just so gross. Like,
I thought Charlotte's Web is a good classic that everybody should read.
That is a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh, but Kay, I agree with you on the importance of Animal Farm. I think it's very important to learn the dynamics of problems in societies. And
Marissa, I don't want to say, if I was in an English class, I probably would still teach Lord of the Flies. I would hate every second of it, but I would probably still teach it. So don't get me wrong. I understand its importance. I just hated it as a kid.
I'm just so you're clear, it was never one of my favorites.
Yeah.
I just got something out of it to the point where like I still remember it.
Things I probably have people read. 1984.
Yes.
Animal Farm. Heart of Darkness. Slaughterhouse-Five. Beloved. I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. The Help. To Kill a Mockingbird. A Christmas Carol. Dostoevsky's, why can't I think of the name?
Crime and Punishment.
Crime and Punishment. I'd say Native Son is important. I'd say all of like Letter from Birmingham Jail, Martin Luther King, as well as the writings of Malcolm X, Diary of Anne Frank.
I feel like everybody.
Diary of Anne Frank is so dark, though. I mean, I get its importance,
but
The
it's
Kite Runner.
History,
yes,
so
Kite Runner.
What else? Night by Elie Wiesel.
Yeah.
I would add now The Book Thief would be an important one for young people. If I Should Die Before I Wake is a good one to do with Diary of Anne Frank. For a younger group, Number the Stars.
Yeah, I think Holocaust fiction you have to stagger based on age group.
The Giver.
I didn't like.
Really? I think The Giver is so important. I think that's just such an important story for that age group. I mean,
Why?
The Giver?
Oh my God.
Oh my God.
Good.
It's like, why do we need to remember the past? It's like, what happens if we take the emotions and what we learned out of the world?
Right. I didn't like the ending because you don't know if he gets there or not. I hate books that are left open to interpretation.
See, I don't know. I didn't mind the ending. And also there's
I
a
didn't
sequel.
mind either.
There's also a sequel, so you can read that. No, I love The Giver, and I think that's one of the most important ones to teach. I think it's so important for the reasons of remembering the past and recognizing ourselves as complex emotional beings.
I don't know.
All right, you have different tastes in literature than I do. It's okay. I think that one is really super important.
I
mean, it's the same thing as I'm not a fan of Lord of the Flies either, and I mean, I don't see that one as important as The Giver.
Same.
I see The Giver as like a critical piece of literature. If you're an English teacher, you have to cover it.
I just guess I don't really see what the big lesson is with that and why it's so critical.
The big lesson of The Giver is that we can't forget the past and that we are complex, emotional human beings. And if we start treating each other like automatons and not complex, emotional human beings, we're going to lose all the beauty in the world.
Because with all the pain that comes with that, because they were trying to take away the pain and the sadness and the angst, but if you take away that and you take away all the beauty and the joy,
like with good
and
comes bad.
Like, there's such a danger, and then we become nothing more than a robot.
I just remember reading it and thinking it was dumb.
No, I get that. Like books like Heart of Darkness, even oh God, like things like Nicholas Nickleby, things like Les Mis, things like Great Expectation. But that I read as an 8th grader, and I was like, this is the worst. And then I read it in college, and I was like, this is not bad. And then I read it as a 26-year-old, and I was like, this is good literature. So
well, I also think that's something that has to be addressed. Like, when do we drop these stories in putting these kind of really important works of fiction in, like, 7th grade, when really you shouldn't be able to comprehend it before you're 16 years old? Then, of course, people aren't going to like it. And I think that's something that... and we're talking from an adult perspective. You know, I think the majority of people who are listening to us are adults. Yeah, it's important to give the right books at the right time. So, you know, don't give a child who's not prepared for a particular story or a particular theme or lesson something that is above their heads, even if they can decode all the words. And now I'm getting into, like, my, you know, field and, you know, rants about that. Decoding is not the same as comprehending. Just because a kid can say the words doesn't mean that they can comprehend or that they should be reading that story at that time. It's a different skill entirely.
I think that's an important point, as is the point that, like, I'm thinking now, and I'm like, maybe I shouldn't have been like, I hate Lord of the Flies to poor Marissa, because, like, one of my favorite books to read in high school is Crime and Punishment, which, if anybody has ever read a Russian novel, there's, like, every character has, like, 6 names and nicknames, and, like, most people really can't stand those books when they read them in high school. So Marissa, I feel you with Lord of the Flies if it touched you, because I was touched by Crime and Punishment. Mainly because
I kind of wasn't really touched by either, but that's okay.
Like, no, mainly because I was at a point in my life where it gave me the ability to start seeing the gray areas, because I was always a very black and white person, and Dostoevsky just writes such a riveting story and such a complex character that I started to go, huh, So I think that speaks to what you were saying, Marissa, that like Lord of the Flies touched you in a way that maybe like it was just what you needed at the time. And it's like you're bringing your background.
Right.
And
I wouldn't say it's like a positive way. It was just like
no.
Wow,
And when I'm saying
it's like, wow, this is messed up. We have to make sure we never get like that. And back to The Giver for a second, were there parts of it that I liked? Yes. I mean, it wasn't a terrible book, but is it my all-time favorite? No.
And that's okay. Disagreement is, is a valuable thing.
And that's one of the most valuable things about literature is that it makes us think. If it didn't make us think, then it wouldn't be good literature.
Why leave it open?
I think they wanted you to be able to take the lessons from the story and use them yourself. So about like there's a world with nuance and there's good and bad. It wanted you to be able to like take the good and bad and see both perspectives.
Just in books in general, I don't like it when the ending is open to interpretation.
I think it depends on the story. I like that sometimes. Other times I don't, but sometimes I like that.
And the thing is, like, in life, like, I used to be the same way. Like, I used to hate when a book would, like, leave me hanging. But then I think it was, like, a point when I think I was in grad school when I was reading things and I just, like, something clicked and I was like, oh, life doesn't give you a concrete answer. It's not like life says, like, even something like Harry Potter, it gives you, like, a solid ending. But at the same time, like, one of the last things is, like, Harry's scar hadn't hurt him in so many years. Like, so that still leaves it open to, like, that doesn't mean that there's never going to be any trouble again. It's just that his scar hasn't hurt him. So that means in that many years,
still
nothing
open.
has happened. But it's still open to, like, stuff can still happen because in life, stuff can still happen. Like,
it never closes.
Like,
that's true.
It's like what I said before about, okay, I got to the end of the narrative. Now I don't have to work on this thing in my life anymore. But life still goes on, and it's a mountain range. Kayla's thing about it's a mountain range.
So I feel you, Marissa, but
No, I totally get your point. It's a good debate. It is.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think other important pieces of literature. I would definitely say of the newer fictions. I know I mentioned it before, but things like Hunger Games, things that reflect the world, sci-fi things that bring in what could possibly happen. I think sci-fi is actually super important because our world is growing technologically day by day. There's constantly more and more inventions going on and on and on and on. And I think sci-fi literature is super important for that reason. It's another reason why like classics like 1984 are still so relevant. And I actually got the experience of seeing the Broadway production of it about a year ago. And I loved that they were able to bring that to a current world. It's not set now. It is still set in 1984. But I love that they were able to bring such an important piece of literature on stage. And, I love theater, so that was great to see. But sci-fi things, such as The Hunger Games. There was one that I did with 7th graders a couple years ago called The Barcode Tattoo.
That's a good one.
It's very good. And it's about, like, you're not going to need any ID anymore. You're going to have a barcode, but what do they know about you from the barcode? And it goes into, like, privacy, and it goes into, like, the question of, like, what does Google know about you? I mean, the book doesn't address Google, but the things that the government knows about you and can control about you because of your barcode was very disturbing. And I think those are things that we need to think about.
Even, like, short stories, too. Like, I think I'm saying this, Harrison Bergeron.
Harrison Bergeron is great. Yeah,
so
it's
good.
Dark, but it's very important.
And then, like, even some, I feel like I was very, very fortunate when I was at University of Limerick for my master's degree that I was in a comparative literature class and I was able to read works of literature that were adapted from their original languages about periods of history that aren't necessarily brought to light as an American in a history class. So, for example, literature written about the Spanish Civil War, like The Blind Sunflowers and The Shadow of the Wind, is just so important because the Spanish Civil War isn't discussed, mainly because Francisco Franco, who was the dictator at the time, was being overshadowed by the horrendously awful human being Adolf Hitler, and of course Mussolini in Italy. So, but like that, reading historical fiction, I think, is so important. Whether you're reading books about World War II or books about the Civil War or books about, I know like there's a TV show on right now on AMC called Turn that's based off of Washington Spies.
Mhm.
Like, I think it's so important to read books of historical fiction because even if not all of it's true, its roots are in the truth of what happened, and it really gives you an appreciation for different time periods and where they come from.
Absolutely.
So, sorry, I know this is like going to sound like a tangent. So, like, this is how much I think about stuff, Marissa. Like, you brought up like that book that like touched you, and then I was like, okay, so how can I sympathize with this? And then I was like, oh, I thought of a book that I read that I hated, but I think is so important for kids to read. The book is called, and it's also a film. So for anybody that wants to cry their eyes out and, you know, want to eat chocolate cake for the next hour after finishing the book or film, The Boy in the Striped Pajamas.
Oh man, I hate that book, but I get your point.
But like, it was one of those that it's just so important because like you see a Nazi officer really coming to understand like, oh my God, I'm killing people. But he didn't realize it until his own son was killed. Like, and like, you're not killing, you know, gypsies or homosexuals or Jews. You're killing people. Like, of course you're killing those groups, but like, they're human beings. And I think that was why it was such an important piece of literature, even though I hate it. Well done writing that, but I hate it.
I'm trying to make a list of other books that I think are important that we haven't yet touched on. And a lot of the ones that I initially thought of, we have touched on. One that actually just crossed my mind, and it's actually a novella, is Anthem.
Yeah.
Anthem is, if you haven't read it or aren't familiar with Anthem, it is by Ayn Rand, and it is about the loss of the individual, where there are no individual pronouns any longer. So everything is we, even if you're referring to yourself in the singular sense. There's no such word as I or me. And it has to do with a culture that brainwashes people into following just their one set of beliefs. And it takes away the individual. And I think it's very important because it is about the act of discovering that, wait a second, I am different than you, and we're not all a we. We have individuality, and I think that sense of individuality is very important. We did touch on a lot of these. Fahrenheit 451 I also think is important.
Yeah.
Because it's about a war on knowledge, basically, and they are destroying... If you're not familiar with that book, the title refers to the temperature at which paper burns, and it is about burning books.
Go Ask Alice is important. It's a more recent one. It's important with like the rise of drug addiction in young people. It's told as a stream of consciousness novel by someone who's slowly becoming addicted to drugs. So that's important, I think.
Wrapping it up.
Closing with an important book that you have yet to read, but you know you need to. I feel like I need and want to read Fahrenheit 451. I've never read it.
Book.
Mine is
Fahrenheit 451.
I have the book that Malala wrote, and I've heard really good things about that. It looks really good, and it's a really, I think, quick read.
Yeah, I have quite a few. I mean, there are some classics that I have not read. I don't believe I've read all of Jane Eyre, actually. In terms of more modern literature, I want to read A Million Little Pieces.
I started Iran Awakening. I need to continue reading that one.
I thought of another important book. Not necessarily for children, but for adults. The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime.
I started it, but I didn't finish it.
Okay.
But so is Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close is also really good.
Okay, yeah. Those are definitely good ones. The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime is about a kid on the autism spectrum. And it is the way that he sees the world. And it is a very interesting take on that reality. And if you are somebody who works with anybody who has any sort of disability, or you even know any of those people, or just you're an empathetic person and want to find out more about different ways that the mind works, it's a very interesting read.
Similar with Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close. I can't remember what specifically the child is, but it's his perspective dealing with his father's death on 9/11.
Yeah.
So that's a recent novel that was adapted into a film as well. So that's another important one. as is a lot of the 9/11 literature, which I think people don't read because they think it's too soon. But I think that saying that is an excuse, and we can't learn from something if we don't read about it or research it.
I think we're going to have so much more to say about literature, and we're going to have to break it down even more in future ones. But
yes,
there are so many great books out there we should all be reading. And listeners, if we've overwhelmed you with all of the suggestions of books, don't worry. I'm actually going to try to put a list of these in the show notes, so you can have book recommendations from us. Let us know what you think about the books. And we would love to hear your book recommendations too.
Happy reading. Thanks for listening. We appreciate it. And until next time.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks for joining us again this week for another edition of the Sapio Files. If we mentioned a book that you would like to find, you can find it on our attached reading list. If you would like to join the conversation, give us your book recommendations, recommend a topic for a future podcast, or just tell us a little about you, you can email us at sapiofilespodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on Twitter @The Sapio Files, on Instagram @The Sapio Files, or on Facebook. Our page is simply called The Sapio Files. Happy reading. Stay curious. We'll see you next week.